Maggie Nick, hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So I feel like, we've done little interviews here and there before. And so I'm so excited to get you on the podcast officially. Welcome. So I came across you first because of your Instagram page. And, you're a therapist, you are an expert in kids and parenting and all kinds of, I want you to talk a little bit more about yourself for those who don't know.
So I was a perfect child, definitely a
Hi,
good
me
kid.
too.
Yeah. And we're just gonna spend the rest of our lives recovering from that, aren't we? Um,
Apparently.
yeah, I mean, I had the air quotes great childhood. I was drawn to working with kids who were hurting, which is curious. In my early days before I was a therapist, I was a social worker and I worked with kids who were grieving, kids who had been sexually assaulted and like abused. And like that felt like it didn't fit. And as I've healed, it turns out that is a part of my history. So that's interesting. But I really just didn't know that the perfectionist, people pleaser, high functioning person wasn't who I really was. Like that's who I thought I was. And people would tell you I was the happiest person they'd ever met in their life and nothing ever bothered me, right? It was like
Yep.
and all these things that I write about on parenting with Perspectacles about, my parents would have said she's a delight. Like I almost feel like she's parenting herself. And you know, all
Hmm.
of this stuff. Like she's so low maintenance and nothing ever bothers her and doing so well. And it turns out I wasn't. And so my last 15 or so years has been about trauma therapy and walking through those fires from my childhood. And I became an accidental expert in parenting, low self-worth. And when I opened my counseling practice right out of grad school, I ended up with a bunch of oppositional defiance disorder kids. I had helped one family when I was in grad school and they referred a bunch of families to me. And I just think there's a lot of important insights about shame-based discipline and the ways in which we don't even realize we're shaming our kids. And also like there's this like weird thing where we're trying to get kids to like cry and be vulnerable and express feelings that way, but that's not how a lot of kids express certain types of
Mm.
stress. And so then there's all this shame because kids are like, what's wrong with me? And parents are like, what's wrong with me? My kids being angry or defiant. And like we're trying to mold them into these little compliant good kids. It's like anyway, I felt like I had a lot of information to share, and so I started parenting with Perspectacles, and now on all the socials I'm Maggie with Perspectacles, just so I can share information about parenting and reparenting, but also sharing insights about my own healing journey, healing from perfectionism and people pleasing and being a control freak and anxiety and eating disorders and all that, all the traumas.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's why I was probably drawn to your page because I can relate. Same thing, I was the perfect kid, all good grades. I never talked out of place. In fact, I was super quiet. I barely talked at all, to be honest with you. So, and then here I am, doing radio and everything in a podcast. But yeah, so I find your work fascinating. And one of the things, I don't know, there's so many areas we could kind of touch on, but I think one of the things that I first was really interested in when I came across your page was, I just remember you like, kind of just like you mentioned that this idea where we sort of, expect kids to act in a certain way. And when they don't, we get really mad. And then, like you say, we want to shame them and we may not even realize we're doing it. And, having a daughter now of my own, she's only 7 months, but, down the line, I was like, what is this about? Like, what can I do to be better about it? And you even encourage tantrums, right?
Yeah.
Tell me more about that because I think a lot of time, like tantrums make me very nervous. They still do, like one day when I'm gonna have to deal with it. But tell me, why do you encourage it?
Boy, they're so triggering for so many of us. I mean,
Yeah.
just deeply triggering. And I think our impulse to shut them down is deeply rooted in how we were made to feel when we acted that way. There's a lot of
Hmm.
like shame and worthlessness that kind of shows up around like when I acted that way, my parent gave me the silent treatment. When I acted that way, my parent yelled at me and it was terrifying. And so
Hmm.
our nervous system remembers how it went from our attachment figure from our parent. And so I had those impulses to shut them down. I mean, I did. And when my daughter was a baby, like we did that, I can't remember what it's called, but that calming reflex, like the shooing, and like every time she cried, we like helped her calm down. And like just not having any idea that like the crying was serving a purpose and like kids release stress that way. And like we were
And you know
accidentally
how
making
Yeah, I forget this. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and like we were accidentally like I like to think about a 1 to 10 scale. 10 is where it's like our body cup is full and we can't hold any more stress. Our bodies can go above 10, like mine did throughout childhood
Mhm.
with trauma. And then we have to dissociate. Like it's too much, right? So our bodies can go above 10, but we don't really want them to long term. And so when my daughter was crying, she was at a 9. And so I somehow get the crying to stop, but she has 10% bandwidth. So the next thing that comes along, she's going to be crying again until I can allow her to release that down. Like you can't, I have issues with calm down corners with older kids because you're taking a kid at an 8 and having them snuggle soft things. Like when I'm flirting with mom rage, I don't want to snuggle soft things. I need to punch some pillows.
Yeah.
I need to get that out.
Yeah.
If tears are coming, let's go. But like most of us, a lot of us have more of an anger response. Anger feels more empowering than being vulnerable. And so it's like I just feel like we need to restore a trust in our bodies and in our kids' bodies that like when I'm crying over the silliest thing in the grocery store, I'm at a 9.8. Like I will not feel better until I am regulated. And I cannot regulate without a release.
Mm.
Right. And kids, in terms of tantrums, like kids, I talk about how kids resist to release to regulate. Like the resistance, the disrespect, the tantrums, the meltdown, that's the resistance. And kids resist to release. So kids don't even, it's not a conscious, rational, reasonable thing, but their brains are like, hey, cool, we're at a 9. So now we need to have a release. So what you need to do is do something you're not supposed to do. And hopefully mom will say no and hold it. And we can push against that. And we can say, I wanted that piece of cake. I don't like it. I hate you. And if our mom can help us feel safe and secure and hold that boundary, we can resist and release and be regulated again, you know? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like the ODD kids I worked with was where I first saw this. And I saw like so many of them had gone to clinical psychologists who are evidence-based around emotional self-regulation, and they were encouraging them to not like punch up pillows. And I was like, but that work is not considering shame. Like there's this massive confounding variable here that
Mm-hmm.
shame is what drives aggression. Being overwhelmed is not what drives aggression. When I'm overwhelmed, I don't beat people up. And I'm overwhelmed like all the time. If I'm beating someone up, it's because shame has showed up and now I've got to lash out at someone.
Mm.
And so all of these families were told, like, don't let him get mad. Don't. So these kids were like living at a 9 and like them being shamed for like acting like someone, like when I'm at a 9, I'm not a pleasant lady to be around, right? I'm like a balloon that's about to burst, right? The pressure. Like, and we expect, and I think we were all expected to do this. We were living between like a 6 and a 10, but expected to act like we were down at a 2 or 3. It's like a fundamental mismatch. But our parents made us feel, with the best of intentions, because they thought they were teaching us, they made us feel like there was something wrong with us for acting like we were at a 6, 7, 8, or 9.
Mm.
And so there just needs to be this huge shift. Like when my kid, like yesterday, one of my kids had a huge meltdown trying to get ready for school. My kids are 5 and 8. That's not like a normal thing. And so when my kid is, out on the floor screaming, I often say I'm parenting with Perspectacles. The thing is not the thing. It's not about the clothes. This has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with like the clothes is like 2% of the situation. I think she had a really bad dream overnight. And I think there were some feelings stored up from that. And so she woke up wherever she woke up, and then we slammed into 10. And
Mm.
like me trying to help her see that actually it doesn't matter about the clothes, like that's not going to help. Like what I need to do is hold boundaries and like let her blow up. And like for her, it needed to be an explosive, angry release. And once we got through it, she was like singing songs on the way to school
This is,
and
yeah, and
apologizing for saying mean things to me because she did. And all
really,
on her own, she's like, "Why did I say that to you?" I'm like, "Because you were at a 10. Like we say,
wow.
no, you
So, so like, right. So, okay. So a kid might feel something, whether like you're saying it's a dream they had or something bothers them, or maybe something happened
stress from yesterday that they went to
just
bed
from
with.
yesterday. So they have this thing and they suddenly, feel it a 7 or 8, whatever it might be. And then like your daughter had a just complete meltdown. So what are you doing? Like when you're saying setting boundaries, what did you do in that moment?
So at this age, she's 8. So it's not really aggression. It was for many years. Kids don't get the parts of the brain that come together to form impulse control aren't in place and working well together until a kid is about 7, somewhere
Hmm.
between 6 and 7. So kids below that, they're going to have they're going to want to hit and kick and throw and break. And like, that's developmentally appropriate. It's a fundamental mismatch for us to think that we can teach them how to not do that. Like, their parts of the brain are not there. So at this point, it's not really an aggressive, like holding her hands and feet type thing. Like it can be for other kids where it's like, I'm not going to let you hit. I see you feel like hitting, not what's wrong with you, but like, oh, okay. You're needing to, and what often kids who hit, they're either like 4 or 5 and they have a younger sibling who's getting held all the time. And so there's like this need for physical proximity to their parent, and their parent's not holding them as much, maybe because there's a new baby, or maybe because they're getting heavier. It's harder to hold them, which is where,
Uh-huh.
and so it's interesting, like kids go through this shift. And I think that's part of it often, is that it's like, I need you to put your hands on me. Like, not, and it's a pause, not clause situation. It's not like I'm going to hold your hands. It's a like, woo, you feel like hitting. You're having a hard time controlling yourself. I'm not going to let you hit me, and I'm going to hold your hands. And as soon as you feel like you can control yourself, I'm here. Like, you're in a storm. The tantrum is controlling you right now. And I just need to help you stay safe and help me stay safe until you can regulate down.
Mm.
And what impulse control kids do have before 6 and 7 comes back when they're like at a 5 or 4. It just goes offline completely when they get dysregulated. So for her, it was more like, you said have to wear this. I don't want to wear this. Just kind of that kind of stuff. And so it's triggering big time for me, because I couldn't cry, I couldn't test. Like, I didn't test because I never felt safe to test. Like, this is uncharted territory for me.
I'm still working on it. Yeah.
Yeah. It would not have gone well for me if I had acted like this. So that's right there for me. But I generally, like, at some point I noticed that kids will even sometimes resist our support. Like, sometimes they're resisting the no, that you said they couldn't have the thing. Sometimes they're resisting, we have to leave, and I don't want to leave. Sometimes my kids lately, it's like, I don't want bath time, or I don't want to take a shower. I want to keep playing, that kind of stuff. For her, sometimes it's like, stop saying that. When I'm like, I love you, she's like, stop saying that. Don't say that to me. Don't look at me. Don't talk to me. And
Yeah.
I just have this attitude of like, yeah, you don't want me to say that. I don't need to fix this. Like, I just need to kind of, and I don't acknowledge everyone, right? Like, this one went on for a while. And so at some point it's like, all right, well, I have to go get breakfast going. So I'll come check on you in a few minutes. And then she's resisting me, but I'm not storming out. It's just more like whew, you're just really upset. And I don't think we're going to get there right now. I think you just need
Mhm.
to have a release, and we'll figure this problem out after. So like,
Yeah.
I gotta go make breakfast and I'll come check on you. And then, no, don't walk out. And you just walk out, like, and then I love you, hang in there, from the kitchen.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, well, that'll lead me to another question, but I guess I as you're speaking, I was thinking of something I saw for the holidays actually, where I was at the zoo with my daughter and I, was just carrying her around or whatever. And then as I was leaving, I saw um a daughter who is, I think a daughter and a dad, and she was kind of acting up a little bit, and he grabbed her hand. I thought he almost was going to pull it out of her socket and kind of like dragged her to the side and was kind of saying, don't do that. I need you. I don't know what he was saying, but I'm thinking of what you're saying. And, this is obviously, these things happen in public too. What do you do when it happens in the grocery store? And, it sounds like what you're saying, don't handle it maybe like that if you can.
Yeah. I mean, if you're generally, like, unless there's other things going on, generally, if your child is having this kind of public meltdown situation, like, they're young enough that you can pick them up. And that's what we usually do. Just pick them up and
Mhm.
take them out the door, around the corner, to the car. And it's not like a storming off. It's just like, I'm going to give us a little bit of privacy. Let's go deal
Okay.
with this. My son, who's 5, has a hard time sitting sometimes at restaurants while we're waiting for the food, and so we've just kind of learned, one of us takes him and walks him around,
Mm.
to like, cause like, trying to force him to sit when he clearly like has energy he needs to burn. Like, he's 5 years old.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were expected to sit still at 5 years old, but I'm arguing that's not developmentally appropriate sometimes. Sometimes he can, other times he can't. Like, I think there are things you can do on the prevention side. Like, if we see stuff starting to kind of set him off, it's like,
Mhm.
all right, we are headed towards meltdown. So let's see if we can get him outside, and like, maybe we
Mhm.
don't let this bomb go off here in this restaurant. Like, maybe we see what we can do. And a lot of kids need to hit 10 before you can reason with them. Like, on the way up, they're in what Gordon Newfield calls counter will. I consider like 7 territory and up is where the resistance shows up. And
Mm.
so they're going to need, if you say, hey, let's punch pills together to try to prevent the meltdown, they're just going to have to resist it. My kids do. Once
Yeah.
they kind of hit 10 and they're coming back down, that's when generally, but I don't have very many examples of kids where you've been able to kind of prevent it. Sometimes it's just their body just needs to release. And the other thing from like a stress response standpoint, so we have many more than this, but fight, flight, fawn, freeze, right?
Mhm.
It's a stress response. And then if you go through trauma, that's likely your blueprint for a trauma response. The fawning is like parent pleasing. Like all of us people pleasers. We were parented in such a way, and or our biology, right, is set up in such a way where we tended towards a fawn stress response, which is like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, oh my God, I'm so sorry, right? That kind of parent pleasing. And like there's literature around children who have fight mode, how it protects them when they go through trauma. But
Mm.
like parent goals in modern parenting is for all of your kids to be little fawns, to be little parent pleasers. Right. So
Mm.
you're supposed to say, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. What is wrong with you? You could have worked out, like that kind of stuff. And there's this goal to like mold all of our kids into little fawns. And that's when you have a good kid. And that's when you're a good parent. Right. And that's a dangerous game we're playing. Right. So
Yeah.
my son and my daughter to some extent, like when they're fighting back, that's fight mode. I don't want to quash that. I can. And if I want to, I will. Because shame is so corrosive. Shame
Mhm.
will just wash that so hard. And they will be all of us who are afraid of other people are mad at us, all of us who are afraid we're letting everybody down, like welcome to the world of a fawn, right? And
Mhm.
that's not what I want from my kids. Like I want them to have access to fight mode. God forbid they go through a trauma, not just for the moment, but as they heal after. Like we heal from a mental health standpoint, we heal in fight mode. Fawning, and that's an unnecessary part of healing, but like they're like, oh God, this is so hard. That's like fawning, right? And like, I hope it's not bad today. I hope my anxiety is not bad today. Fight mode is you put your shoulders back and you're like, all right, anxiety, what are you trying to teach me?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Like fight mode is where we heal. And so many of my clients, it's like trying to get them to move out of fawning and freezing and fleeing into fight mode, because I just deeply believe that fight mode is where we heal. So not just in the moment to be able to fight back theoretically, but also just for the anytime they're dealing with stress to have access to fight mode. And I don't mean fight mode as in fighting people. I mean it's that kind of like rise up to the challenge instead of like shoulders in, right, getting small, playing dead, running
That's
away.
so interesting because as you're saying it, that's been, I think, a big part of my journey is sort of right. Like I said, I'm super quiet growing up. I never participated in class. I was too afraid to talk, too afraid to say anything. So that's been a big part of my journey, just being able to speak up. And you're right, sort of having this, okay, I can do this. It's okay. And I never thought of it that way, like in
Right.
the being in fight mode. And also I wanted to touch on the fact, like I gave the example of, the guy who's taking his daughter or whatever, kind of by the arm and saying, well, don't do that. But I know it's not that easy for us, right? Like our kids, I know, are our biggest teachers, I've heard, and I'm learning. And so as a parent, if we're not quite there, what do you recommend for parents then?
And follow me for starters. Just
Yes.
kidding. But no, I mean, I think so much. So I remember when I first had like the calling, if you will, to do this, and I thought I was going to make stuff for moms. It's funny, I've kind of circled back to that. But my highest self was like, no, you're going to teach parents about little them, about their inner child. And you're going to like basically, like, I was finding that like I was helping my clients say these kind things to their inner child, helping them learn how to soothe their inner child. And there was a moment where I was like, what if I just taught parents how to do that to their child? Right? It's all the same work. Everything I say to my kids, my inner child needs. And so it's like my highest self was like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to
Mhm.
teach parenting through reparenting. Like you're going to help these parents feel brave enough to look back and go, oh, my parent did their best. They had no idea what they were doing, but wow, that was awful. Right. And like learn how to see their kids in that way of like kind of releasing the shame that they may have felt around they were bad or they didn't deserve love or all these things that drive things like perfectionism and people pleasing and anxiety. Like what if we got in there and help parents understand why they've struggled with all these things and understand where that's rooted in parenting so that they can break the cycle there. Like what if I could empower a generation of parents to raise kids saying the things that I say to my inner child? Like, can you even?
Mind blown. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, And so in that moment when your kid is like having that tantrum or whatever, and you want to, kind of like you're saying, maybe yell back or whatever it might be, what would you suggest? Just maybe like taking a beat and thinking about, okay, or what maybe could
Yeah.
that process look like? Yeah.
So there's like in the moment stuff, and then there's like the rest of the time stuff that
Right.
impacts the in the moment. Um, in the moment, like sometimes, like I find if like, all right, let me think how to explain this. So back to the 1 to 10 for those that are listening, not seeing my hand. Um, there are times that I go 2 and then 3 and then 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And then there are times that I'm at like a 5 and all of a sudden I'm at a 10.
Mhm.
And like I don't know how the hell I got here, but now I'm yelling. Like I didn't, it's like there's no pause. There's no opportunity to
Yeah.
pause. And that's one thing that pisses me off about gentle parenting as a whole, is I feel like there's not an acknowledgement of the trauma piece. Like when I go from a 5 to a 10, trauma just got activated. Old
Mm.
feelings that I bottled up years ago that are familiar to what's happening right now, right? Somebody making me feel not good enough, somebody making me feel like I let them down, whatever, gets activated. And then my stress level, like it's like that stuff comes alive and it takes my stress level. So there's like no opportunity. So like the answer in both instances is to release. Like you're at a 10 now, right? Like you
Mhm.
need, if your child's nervous system is going to co-regulate to wherever you are. So step one is you need to calm the hell down. And you can't do that with freaking deep breaths. Like they're great, but like not going to get us there in a regulated
Great.
state. They are great. They're
Yeah.
transformative, but they might get us like 20%, but they're not going to regulate us all the way down. The only way through this, if you picture a balloon that's about to burst, is to release the air from the balloon. And
Mm.
so that means like it's hard when our kids are toddlers. And like I remember when my second was born and I was like trying to walk away because my oldest was triggering me because of how she was, being a big sister, putting him
So,
in his, and I would like try to walk away to go punch pillows and she would follow me, which like I get it, right? I'm dysregulated. She can feel that. She's feeling a need to come to me because I'm dysregulated and that makes her feel scared. So, but it was like these moments of like, oh my God, I'm trying not to yell at you. Like I'm trying to do the right thing and you won't leave me alone. So when our kids are younger, that's hard. Like sometimes you just like, if they're little enough, you can put them in a playpen, do it. If you can walk away, like sometimes like putting the TV on really quick and like sitting them in front of the TV and then you go to your room. Like I definitely went through a place where I felt way too vulnerable when I was first like feeling safe to cry. Couldn't do it in front of my kids and really couldn't
mm,
even punch pillows. At this point, I like pull a pillow down on the floor and just go, which is often the only thing that'll get them to do it too.
okay.
But like you've got to release that stress. You don't have to regulate all the way down, but like I feel like we can't get our perspectacles and like, okay, this is the parent I want to be. This is how I want to respond. There's my kid. That behavior's not them. Like we can't get our perspectacles on until we're at like a 6 usually or 5. I mean, everybody's different. And so we've just got to regulate down a little bit. And so that means punching pillows. Like I'll often duck into our laundry room and like squeeze my fist and clench my jaw and just be like, ah! Because if I don't, I'm headed towards 10.
Yeah.
Like I'm headed towards rage. Like, and
I
so
know.
it's okay for me to be frustrated about the thing. Sometimes the thing is not the thing for me. Like the jar that won't open is like activating my not good enough stuff from childhood. Like not about the jar. It's about how I feel. Like I'm trying so hard and don't you see? And why isn't it working? Right. Some of that is like familiar. And so like the long-term strategy here is if you release every time you need to, number one, your body finally builds a tolerance for distress, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we don't have to numb compulsively because we have a little bit of a tolerance for distress. Number two, like we learn that we can survive big feelings, which is kind of revolutionary for a lot of people. But number three, we're releasing some childhood trauma every time.
Mm.
Like if this is a seesaw, right? And you have this much and you have this overreaction, like every time you release, you're taking down. So it's like over time, that makes sense. So the answer is to release
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
term and in the moment.
And in the moment, right. And,
Not
you know,
bottling.
right. And so I have a daughter, like I said, 7 months. And it's interesting what you're saying. It's because I forget that maybe the same thing is going on here when she's crying. And I always try.
Oh
I
yeah.
hate it when she cries. So you're saying kind of it's a similar concept.
Well, and I think sometimes, yes, 100%. And also sometimes we feel like we're emotionally abandoning our kids if we don't attend to them. Like we felt emotionally abandoned when we were crying, but that's because our parent was withdrawing. Like
Mm.
we think if I don't help her and like actively soothe her and make this better, I'm emotionally abandoning her. And that's not true. Like you being a compassionate standby and I'm here and you can do this. I'm not going anywhere. You've got this. Your body's doing what it needs to do. Like that's not abandoning her.
Mm. So when she cries, just kind of like be there with her, but don't necessarily have to actively try and soothe her. Yeah,
I mean, I'm
that's
not
one
saying
of,
you can't like rub her back, but like you don't need to quash this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's something I got to remember.
Or
It is. It's hard, but I think that's what you're saying is like this is all, it's all work, right? And it's all learning and teaching and so Maggie, yeah, why I just, if like you said, people should definitely follow you to get more help and information on all of this and what else do you want to let people know about that in ways that you can help or even other resources that they can maybe lean on?
yeah. I mean, I think I gentle parenting made me feel like a failure. I feel like it's so important to talk about this. Like
Yeah.
I felt like I had read the book, I'd listened to the podcast, and like I should be able to do it. And like when I had mom rage, despite knowing the steps, like I just had so much, I'm a failure, what is wrong with me? All these things. And if you have that response too, like it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Like we are trying to fit a square peg into the round hole of our childhood. Like what we're trying to do does not fit with what happened to us. And the way that we were parented was laced with shame, unfortunately. Despite our parents' best efforts, I think to be great parents, I think they did their best, but like it's really hard and it's okay if it's hard. And I remember when I first started posting about how parenting is hard for me and I get triggered just being like, are they going to take my parenting expert card? Like, it was, and you don't see that, right? Parenting experts like seem to have it all together. And like, I believe one of the leading experts in this space in terms of having a revolutionary framework that's very evidence-based and shame informed. And I struggle every freaking day as a parent with mom rage and mom guilt. Like a lot less than I used to, a lot less than I would if I didn't have all the tools. Like when it shows up, I know what to do. Like I'll beat myself up. But it's still there.
Hmm.
And there are days where I am the parent that I swore I never would be. And like, that's okay. I
Hmm.
just wish more parenting experts would talk about that side.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that really sticks with me is the idea that, I think we think as a parent that, okay, I'm a parent now. I have to have this whole thing together. I got to know what I'm doing. And, I either read it or heard somebody say that kids are going to teach us more than we even realize.
Yeah.
And hearing you talk about this, I could see where, yeah, it is going to be, I'm now gonna, wait for the day that my daughter sets me off. Although I'm still working on that piece, Maggie. I don't know. I know the anger thing. I gotta, yeah. Well, in
Or
terms
you
of
learn to not bottle your feelings, the more you can help your kid. Like if you're still bottling, but
yeah,
like it's really bottling and then like feeling ashamed for having the feelings, that's really ground zero
the
here. Like,
bottling, and yeah, I'm sure there's some shame there. So that's still some stuff I'm working out. But yeah, for sure. So that's why I follow you, Maggie. Thank you so much. And where can people follow you just so they know where to go?
yes, TikTok and Instagram at Maggie with Perspectacles. I'm on Facebook still as Parenting with Perspectacles. Yeah, I'm doing some new projects on estrangement and the mother wound that I'm very excited about. So not just anxiety, perfectionism, people pleasing, reparenting, parenting, but also walking into those waters and sharing my experience with estrangement and the mother wound and
Yeah.
leading things in that space. So
Well, I'm sure we can probably do a few more podcasts, Maggie. So I'll be in touch and we can touch on a bunch of topics. Thank
yeah, thank you.
you.